and let's move on to the next album review of the night. Jeffrey, would you like to usher us into the new...
Sure. Our next album review is the new album by hip-hop artist Killer Mike. It is called Michael. This is his 6th studio solo album for the past 7, 8, 9, 10 years. He has been part of a duo called Run the Jewels with another artist, LP. This album was produced by No ID, Cool and Dre, Cal A, among others. This is like 40, I think he's 45, 46, 47 years old. This is kind of like the old wise man viewpoint in hip hop, in my opinion. He's a socio-political figure, Killer Mike. He has a lot of perspective in a lot of arenas. I thought this was a very nice, mature hip hop album. What do you guys think about this album?
I am on the outside of hip hop. I don't really know a ton, have a lot of reference, but this was one I really enjoyed. I think I liked it more because it had a classic soul sample that it was kind of going from. A lot of organ, a lot of deep bass in this record. I liked a lot of the drums on here, and I think that's why I kind of played for it. It's more of I think an older style mixed with new lot of trap beats on there, but a lot of that A and B, so a lot of that good classic old-timey soul feel. I like that a lot of this record was introspective. I tended to like it when it was more personal and to the point, and whenever he was talking about himself and his family was when I really, really got down with this record. So, a big overall, I liked it.
Yeah, same here. We haven't really reviewed that many hip-hop albums on the podcast, but for me, this record sort of is in form with, the Nas's and the Kendrick Lamars, and I definitely think that Killer Mike is showing his capability on this record. Not that he hasn't done that stuff with other solo albums as well as all the Run the Jewels stuff, but this is for me, very much has a lot of introspective things, like Luke was saying, where he talks about a lot of his personal experiences and all that. I do know that this record was started around the time of when COVID had hit. And it was just kind of this idea that it was this sort of mass of collection of songs. He has a great interview on The Breakfast Club. If you have a minute, definitely go check that out. But I think he said he had upwards of something around 35 tracks. He was thinking about just dropping a mixtape, but then had decided, let's just reduce this down. Let's do a full proper album. Got a lot of great features to feature on the record too. I really, really liked it. I think that as time goes on too, it will slowly, not that it isn't already, but it'll slowly kind of be in the ranks of this is one of the best hip hop albums, of our, at least the 10 years, past 10 years for sure, So.
Yeah. So Run the Jewels 4 was probably one of, in my opinion, the stronger hip hop albums of the past couple of years,
yes,
and
sir.
This is definitely, Mike's kind of coming out. I think this is his first solo record since he's through Run the Jewels and other, he's had TV shows and things like that. That he's kind of more of a public persona than he is now than when his classic records came out 10 plus years ago. And through that, I think this is really his attempt at a magnum opus. Obviously there's a lot of biographical material from early ages up through the beginnings of his career. Obviously a lot of love to hear the strong representation for his hometown of Atlanta. Mm-hmm. That being said, I felt it fell flat in the production at times. Although it is great to obviously hear that classic, Mike is very much like a rapper who's both on the cutting edge, but old heads don't think is too, embracing some of the trends that might be, snuffed at by hip hop purists. But with that being said, sometimes with the 808s booming as much as they were, didn't really fit the more introspective vibe, as well as, we'll get into some track stuff in a minute, but overall there's a consistent theme where, a lot of the features on this project were great. It would very much kind of felt a little disjointed. It would be Mike had a verse, and then there was a feature that would happen once, and then Mike would come again, and because that feature was never repeated, I think there's a lack of hooks on this record. Mm-hmm. Not to start with too much of the negatives, because there are a lot of high points. I'll talk about those in a minute, but yeah, overall, I think it was a lofty attempt, and he took a lot on, and the execution was only sometimes there.
Yeah, you mentioned features. There's only one track on this whole album that doesn't feature somebody else, and that's the song Talkin' That Shit, which, although I felt like this album relied a little too heavily on the features because of how they were kind of disjointed and would kind of come in and then disappear. Talking That Shit, the only solo track, was maybe like my least favorite song in the whole album. But I do enjoy a lot of the gospel presence on this album, especially Lena Bird Miles. She has powerhouse gospel vocals on the second track, Shed Tears. The artist Aaron Allen Kane is featured on, I think, multiple tracks, 3 or 4 tracks, doing some great singing. I also feel the same about the beats. A big part of why I love Run the Jewels is that's very much like Bomb Squad, Public Enemy style, like chaotic, over production, which I love, like take a lot of risks, a lot of craziness. And this is very stripped back. This reminded me kind of like the 444 album by Jay-Z, which was another album executive produced by No ID, where it is simpler beats. It's a lot of piano and organ, with, a lot of that kind of like cut up soul stuff. So some strings and trumpets and stuff like that. I thought his perspective was great on this album. I think he has one of the best voices, both how it sounds and also what he writes and what he raps about. I think he has a lot of nuanced opinions. I love how he shared points of view of when he was a teenager, points of view of being a child coming from a home in an underdeveloped economic situation, and then rising to success. I love the Atlanta shouts all through this album. He features a lot of Atlanta artists. One of my favorite tracks is the track Scientists and Engineers, which is Killer Mike with 2 other Atlanta mainstays, which are Andre 3000 and Future, who are 3 dudes who, like, Killer Mike is like speaks from the head, Andre 3000 is like speaks from the heart, and then we know where Future speaks from most of the time. So it although it's like kind of a strange amalgamation, I think it's a good like overview of like what the perspective of artists in major hip hop in Atlanta are coming from.
Yeah, I'll jump in because that was definitely a highlight for me as well. I mean, just all of us who grew up in Outkast's heyday are probably happy to hear Dre 3000 anytime we can.
Yeah.
But yeah, that track in particular, I was mentioning before. Well, sometimes I think it suffered from lack of hook or lack of like repeating an idea. I feel like this is one track where the sort of like ABC format actually was one of its advantages, and if that tied in with a little bit more hooks, like this track could have even more stood out. I will disagree though that probably 2 of the standouts for me sonically were Talkin' That Shit and Run, partially because they have a little bit more of that repetitive hook.
Sure.
And with Talkin' That Shit not having a feature, it kind of puts Mike in that seat, which he's so great in. And then to end on a positive note, another thing that again overall just kind of as an opus, because Mike has so much room to stretch, that there's a lot of different rhythmic flows that he portrays here, right? He has his classic, how to just do 16ths over a boom bap, yes. And there's certainly no shortage of that, but there's a lot of other interesting rhythmic choices that he's able to make in the way, because he's able to stretch out. At times I feel like maybe that he stretches a little bit further, and again we could have used a little bit more tight. But that being said, maybe to another MC or someone who's more familiar with the craft, like maybe this would be their equivalent of like Eric Johnson guitar solos or something. I don't know. So
sure.
Yeah, I found the things that I had difficulty with this was, well, first of all, Killer Mike he's the way that he raps sometimes, it's like it's so dense that it's hard to kind of like, you can't just do one pass. Like you kind of have to keep going back and like, I stream on Spotify, so anytime I saw the lyrics were available, I was like, oh yes, good. And I'd go in and I'd like watch it as it happened. I just read
Genius as I'm listening the whole time, because I'm like, I can't keep up.
Well, that's what I mean, and that's where I was like, oh man, this is like, it's kind of hard, like there's moments where I'm like, my God, there's just so much kind of going on. I also agree as far as the features, though my opinion as far as the features go are, Mike lays down like a lot of knowledge, right? Like with what he's saying and the experience and all of that stuff, where I think some of the features may have fallen short was it's like you get some features who come in and they're like, I'm in the car, I'm doing the thing. And then Killer Mike's like, the politicians are trying to kill everybody. So it's like, you're like, wait a minute, hold on. It seems like there's kind of like this way sort of thing that sometimes.
Like Run?
Run. I was just gonna say.
Right,
It
where I'm
starts-
like,
Run is
I
so
mean, it's-
serious,
you know what I mean?
and
It's
then
so serious. Yeah.
by the time you get to
And
Young
then Young
Thug, at
Thug
the
is
end,
like, I'm giving my bitch ice. And you're like, oh,
Yeah, you know, so like in those regards, yeah, but I do think there are some cool highlights. Like I do appreciate the song "Something for the Junkies." I do enjoy
Yes.
Killer
Yeah.
Mike's inclusivity, even in like Down by Law. I think there's a part in the lyrics where he's like, "This is for the guy that's sitting in the back of the cruiser." Like he makes it very evident, like who this album is for and what it's for and the statement that it's trying to make. So I think he hits the mark there. But yeah, it's just the density of it. I found it sort of difficult to digest, and the features too. Like like we kind of all sort of seem to mutually agree on was kind of like, okay, there were some good parts with features, but some of them seemed a little bit like, okay, all right.
yeah, a little like kind of detached from like the real serious.
What he's
edge.
trying to do, yeah,
Yeah,
he's like, I'm trying to say this thing. You know?
Yeah, I kind of felt that way. And I really think this like connected with me more on like just like the rhythmic. It was kind of more easy and vibey on like a lot of that, and that's where I kind of went with it. The stuff that really did stand out was Scientists and Engineers was one of like the best like kind of posse tracks I've heard in a long time, and really did add a lot to that. Run, even though I didn't really enjoy the Young Thug highlight at the end, was another song I really, really enjoyed. Shed Tears, a great tune on here.
Yeah.
I really liked the whole narrative and how that was how that happened. Also, like Motherless on here. Had the obvious like go to sometimes I feel like a motherless child, which is like the standard folk song, which is really powerful and great, and it had a lot of personal story of him losing his mother and his grandmother and how he deals with that, and coming from like the like hip hop kind of being like the more macho kind of thing. I think this was like more in my style, because that's what I can relate to that more of like somebody like missing their mother, and I could really get on that level with it. So that's the more stuff I really got with on here. And then for me, my only like detachment on this kind of really is the middle of the record kind of felt like it was like kind of turned into like the party kind of, and then it got back to like seriousness at the end. So it started like serious, more of a party in the middle. I could have used like a little less of a party, but it's only because the things I liked on here were the more like really hard hitting serious nature stuff.
Yeah, I will say when I just took my last turn on the round, I didn't say something like, one thing I love the storytelling aspect of hip hop. I'm like a huge Biggie fan, and Biggie is always good to painting that imagery. That's why I thought Slumber was a good track too, as far as here is this story of like this experience in the projects, and like how like young people are like having kids who can't really afford to have kids, and it's kind of this thing, and it's like there's that push pull there. Yeah, and also motherhood. I just know real quick, like as far as like motherhood goes, this was the first time Killer Mike actually said the words like "my mother's dead." He would never actually say, like, even in interviews or anything like that, he would never say that she's dead. He would say like she's passed on, she's moved on, something like that. And this was kind of like an afterthought track that was dropped in after the fact. And it's just such a vulnerable song, like Luca, everything that Luca said. Like,
Really cuts through. Really liked it.
Yeah.
Yeah, this album, it's 14 tracks. It's 54 minutes long. In my opinion, it's like, I don't know, 8 minutes too long for me, because I got to like track 9 and I'm thinking, oh, okay. I think the best shit is possibly like the last 3 or 4 songs though, so like it's worth the wait.
Tough.
But I do like so I'm like at odds with it being a little long, but also the length is kind of expanded because almost every track begins or ends with like a spoken word snippet from a movie or spoken word feature, or Mike doing a little spoken word like summary at the end of a song. So I think that was like a cool album theme, but maybe that's part of what like led it to being a little overrun in my opinion.
And I mean, he obviously has, I in terms of the words the man has to say, I don't think, any of us would say that, it's one verse too many, right? But when you add it all up, I'll do another, so on Spaceship Views, right? Like, Luke mentioned the middle of the album kind of having a different vibe that, maybe is a little, tough to fit in. Like, but for me, like the 2 Chainz auto-tune
Love
verse
it.
on that was like one of the high points, and also just like loving again like Killer Mike as really like a one of the best in the game today, who can like has the respect of folks who maybe think the golden era of hip hop has passed, showing that like no, you're not going to hear auto tune on Killer Mike's voice, but he's going to get down and like show you what his take on that type of a vibe could be. But that being said, I think it suffers from too many ideas in too small of a space. In too small of a space, right?
Yeah.
If anything, I would say either this should be 2 albums or it needs to be a double album and actually let some of those hooks breathe and get people tapping their foot a little bit longer before you go into the next idea.
Sure.
Yeah, I didn't even, because in my head I'm like, it's got to be like one or the other, but you're just being like, it could be longer. I'm like, oh yeah, because if it was longer, you get really a lot more of that like nuance and flavor to like build out over the time. I really like that, man.
Especially a couple songs, he does something that's more prevalent in today's hip hop music, which is like 2 minutes in, the beat completely switches up for the last minute and a half of the song. So I think like that could have been like those tracks could have been made to be 6 minutes long if this was like a double LP, if this was like a Life After Death hour and 20-minute long type of thing. But for a single sit for an album, 55 minutes, it's not crazy long. I think maybe compared to the other album we listened to, it felt long, but I don't know. I think he's one of the best. I'll give my rating to start. Killer Mike, one of my favorites. This is a strong 8 for me.
Yeah, RTJ 1, 2, 3, 4. His Killer Mike's first album is all of my highest rated hip hop albums. But for this one, I'm gonna say 7.5. Again, like, a lot of great ideas. Just I don't see myself coming back to it top to front that often.
Yeah, I will. I'm going to split the difference between you two. I'm going to go 7.7, although I do think it is a great record. Like I said before, it's a bit dense. There seems to be some lyrical theme mismatches kind of sprinkled in on over here that kind of make it hard to follow at times. But overall, a decent album at 7.7.
Yeah, I'm gonna meet James 7.5. Again, like kind of the same sentiments, and I liked a lot of stuff on here. There's some stuff I wouldn't return to, but there's definitely stuff I would listen to again on here. Definitely, and thank everybody for the Andre 3000 verse that we were all wanting. It is one of the best things of all time. So.
We hope to hear another one in 7 more years.
Yes, we do.
Let us know what you think in the comments down below. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Were we right? Sorry, were we wrong?
We were definitely white
Yeah,
during this
we're
whole
totally
podcast.
right. I apologize. Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and comment and subscribe and share the podcast with all your friends, family members, and record collectors this week. James, thank you so much for coming on the
James
podcast.
Cook.
Thank you.
You are
It's been a
always
pleasure.
more than welcome to come back. You always have a home here.
Yes.
Until next time, guys, this has been Get in the Garage. We'll see you next week.
Bye.